Today's lesson will cover percent of change and percent of error. You have two learning targets today. The first one says, I can calculate percent of change in real-world problems. And the second says, I can calculate percent of error in real-world problems. So this is on your note sheet. We're going to use our proportion that we've gotten really good at. To find the percent of change, we are going to do the amount of change, which will actually be a subtraction problem, over the original amount. And then on the right-hand side, of course, we have percent over 100. The percent of change can be either an increase or a decrease. And we're going to make sure that you write your answer in a percent format. This is the problem that I did for you on your note sheet. It says, if a baseball player hit 20 home runs last year and 25 home runs this year, what is his percent of change? Is it an increase or a decrease? Well, my first step is to figure out the change. So if he hit 25 this year and 20 last year, that is a subtraction problem. That means we have a change of 5. So I'm going to write my proportion over here. He hit 5 more home runs. Originally, that means last year, not this year, he hit 20. And we're wondering about the percent. And of course, that's always over 100. So if you picked up your calculator and you took 5 times 100 divided by 20, you would find that your answer will be x equals 25%. Now that answers this first question, what is his percent of change? But we also have to answer the second question, is it an increase or a decrease? So we just have to think about it a little carefully. Last year he hit 20. This year he hit 25. So he increased the number of home runs by 25%. That is your answer. All right, so this is the first one that you're going to do in your notebook. It says, on the first day of school this year, 435 students reported to their school. Last year, on the first day, 460 students attended. Find the percent of change. Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Is it an increase or a decrease? If you think that you know what you're doing, I want you to go ahead and work. Pause me while that's happening and come back for checking. But if you are unsure what you are doing, I want you to stick with me. So the first thing we need to do is figure out this change, and that is a subtraction problem. So we have to figure out the difference, or the answer to our subtraction, from 460 to 435. So the difference in those two numbers is 25 students. So 25 is my numerator. To figure out the original amount, we have to be good readers. So it says this year there were 435, but it said last year there were 460. So this year is not the original amount. It is last year's number. So my denominator is 460. That's going to equal x over 100. So when you pick up your calculator and you take 25 times 100 and you divide by 460, you're going to get kind of a not great decimal. It's going to come out to be this. And I told you I'm never going to have you submit that kind of an answer. Either you're going to make a mistake typing it or I'm going to make a mistake reading it. So look to see how I want you to round it, and I want it rounded to the nearest tenth. So I can have one decimal place. I can't have all this rest of this mess. And so I'm going to cut it off after the first decimal. I'm going to look at this 3. It is not big enough to round up, so I'm going to keep it at 5 4/10%, which is awesome. That answers my first question, find the percent of change. I've rounded it. But the second question, is it an increase or a decrease? Again, I have to think about these numbers. So it went from last year, 460, to this year, 435. So it appears to be a decrease. This is the last practice for percent of change. Again, if you know what you're doing, I want you to pause me and work it out. Come back for checking. If you are unsure what you are doing, I want you to stick with me and follow along. So this problem says, in 1970, the average price per gallon of gas was $1.70. The price for a gallon of gas in 2007 was higher. If the percent of change was 68%, rounded to the nearest whole percent, what was the price per gallon in 2007? So let's go ahead and set up our template. We can fill in some of this information. For example, this 68%, I know where that goes. It goes over 100. And I know the original price, that goes down here. But I am unsure of the change. So I would pick up my calculator. I would multiply $1.70 times 68. So go ahead and do that, please. And then, of course, divide by 100. And so your x is going to come out 1.156. And that is not going to work with our money system. We can only have 2 decimal places, not 3. I'm going to put a cut line right here, and I'm going to look at this number. Because it's a 6, I'm going to say the change, which is where the x was sitting in my framework, was $1.16. That does not answer my question. My question was, what was the price per gallon in 2007? And gas did not cost $1.16 in 2007. It had increased from $1.70. So I'm going to replace this x with my $1.16. So I'm just overwriting that. And so to figure out my price per gallon, I have to think, in 1970 it cost $1.70. It increased by $1.16. That was our change. So in 2007, my answer is actually $2.86. Let's start with a definition of percent of error. Percent of error is a way of telling how accurate we are. The bigger the percent of error, the more wrong a person is. The smaller the percent of error, the more on target a person is. So here is the information on your note sheet. This is percent of error, and I want to make a change really quick. Yours already is changed, but I'm going to change on the screen here. I think actual amount is misleading. Let's call this our expected amount. So we have our framework set up just like we've been doing. We have the amount of error on top over the expected amount and the percent over 100. So here is the problem on your note sheet. It says, suppose there were 50 problems on a test and you got 40 of them correct. What was your percent of error? So I'm going to set up my framework. I don't know the percent, but I know where 100 lives. I know the teacher expected 50 correct answers, but unfortunately I only got 40 of them correct. And so I kind of have a subtraction problem in my mind, just like I did for percent of change. And so if my teacher expected 50 correct answers, but I only produced 40 correct answers, that means my amount of error was 10. So you will pick up your calculator and you will multiply. divide by 100. And it looks like my percent of error, I was off by 20%. All right, so if you think you know what you're doing, I'm going to have you pause me here and work out this problem and come back for checking. But if you are unsure, go ahead and stick with me. So it says, suppose a person got pulled over for speeding. The officer said the driver was going 65 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour speed zone. What was the driver's percent of error? Round to the nearest tenth of a percent. All right, let's set up our framework. I don't know my percent, but I know 100 goes here. And if that driver was going 65 in a 55, they had an error of 10 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. So you would pick up your calculator, take 10 times 100, divide by 55, and you are going to get kind of an ugly decimal. You will get this. That repeats forever until the end of time. So remember, I'm never going to ask you for something like that. Look for the rounding. To the nearest tenth is 1 decimal place. Because this is an 8, I'm going to round this up to an answer of 18.2% error for that driver who's probably getting a speeding ticket. All right, here is your last percent of error problem. There's actually 3 in 1 on this slide. So of course, if you think you know what you're doing, go ahead and get started. Pause me while you work. Come back for checking. And if you're unsure, you're going to go ahead and stick with me. So we're going to have information off of this table. This is showing us that a store had the following delivery. They ordered 3 things: jeans, shoes, and shorts. This is how much they ordered, and this is how much was delivered. So let's take care of the jeans first. I don't know the percent of error, but I know 100 goes here. It looks like they had 20 jeans that were the problem. They were in error. They had ordered 200 but only got 180. So that was 20 jeans in error out of an order of 200. Go ahead and pick up your calculator and solve that. You should have ended up with a percent of error of 10%. Okay, let's change colors. We'll do shoes this time. So we're going to do our framework. I'm not sure what the percent is, but I know 100 lives down here. It looks like there was also an error of 20 shoes out of the 100 that they ordered. So go ahead and pick up your calculator, solve this. And this looks like the shoes had a 20% error. Okay, finally, let's change colors again. Let's talk about the shorts. So I'm going to set up my framework. I don't know what the percent is, but I know it's over 100. It looks like there's an error of 10 shorts. Now this one I think we're going to have to round, but we'll see what happens. So there's an error of 10 shorts because 50 were actually ordered. So if you take 10 times 100 and you divide it by 50, oh, I was wrong. We're going to go ahead and have a nice percent of error of 20% again. All right, it is time for you to work on your video questions for tomorrow. Video question number 1. Originally, someone sold 6 vehicles. Now they have sold 48 vehicles. Find the percent of change. Pause me while you work. Come back when you're ready for question number 2. Video question number 2 says, if a basketball player made 14 points per game last year and 21 points per game this year, what is her percent of change? Is it an increase or a decrease? Go ahead and work this out and pause while you're doing that. Come back when you're ready for question 3. Video question number 3 says, Yosef bought a DVD recorder for $280. If the percent of decrease was 21%, rounded to the nearest whole percent, what was the sale price of the recorder? Pause me while you work this out. Come back when you're ready for question 4. Video question number 4 says, Best Buy put in an order for 1,500 of this year's favorite video game to stock for Black Friday. When the order came in, there were only 900 games. What is the percent of error? Let's round this one, if necessary, to the nearest tenth of a percent. So if it's necessary, round to the nearest tenth. All right, video question number 5 says, the weatherman said that it would be 52 degrees today. It was actually 55 degrees. What was the weatherman's percent of error? Round to the nearest tenth of a percent. When you are done, hang on to your paper. We will check it in class tomorrow.